Yo, this is Steve Bloom, and you're watching Moana Nui Podcast. We'll be starting soon. Don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to another special episode of the Moana Nui Podcast. I am your guest host for this evening, or hostess rather, Chana Lawson, also known as Cece the Geek by some of you in the cosplay community. And also wanted to give a shout out to Moana and Dana for this opportunity and just always entrusting me with their baby, so to speak. So let's get right into it. I want to take time to introduce the guest moderator for the evening, and then I will also introduce our panelists as well. So our guest moderator is the very dynamic and always pleasant Sue Ann Hong, who is the president of the Center for Asian and Pacific American Women. Welcome.
Thank you so much. As always, I always feel welcome in this space. I appreciate it.
Yes. Well, we have a very welcoming personality despite your prestige and your stature, which is like very, kind of people aren't used to that. So it's very refreshing. But yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's introduce our esteemed panelists, if you will. Let's start with Moana, I guess, because you are this is your you're kind of like the one who conceptualized this. I feel like it's only fair. welcome to the author of Nakoa and Nohea, and just all around dope editor and project manager, my mentor, Moana McAdams. Welcome to your own show.
Everyone. Thank you so much, Cece.
You're welcome. I'm sure it's like being in your car and someone else is driving, and then you like automatically start to go towards the driver's seat. You're like, oh wait, no, it's not me right now. But let me introduce our two new panelists who are new to the show, at least as far as I can recall. We have Melva Holt, and Melva, hello.
Hi. So
I was sitting here checking out your portfolio, and it is outstanding. Melva has a proven track record of results building creative HR strategies to deliver outstanding business results. As a hallmark of her career, she is skilled at guiding organizations, and you are the founder of Pays Leadership. That's correct. Specializing in building management capabilities among staff, like executive level staff and leadership.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Prior to founding Pays, Melva was the vice president of HR at, is it Carnan Industrial Technologies? Okay.
Yeah, Command Industrial Technologies.
Okay. And where she led the strategic HR direction for over 3 years, building a business partnership model, leading the efforts of establishing an independent organization through divestiture, if I've said that correctly. Melva began her career in engineering and development program at General Mills. Okay. Over her 14 years at General Mills, she left a variety of leadership positions, increasing responsibility with HR, operations, engineering. Okay, so the long story short is you're a cool person. You're just outstanding. I could go on and on and on, but before I don't want to get too far off the handle here, I want to introduce the lovely Tara Ng, who is the Regional Director, Office of Equity, Inclusion, Diversity for Northern California at Kaiser Permanente. Welcome. So if I may, I want to just brag a little bit about you for a moment. Trusted advisor, strategist, advocate, and internal consultant to affect cultural and systemic change. I like that. Equity, inclusion, and social impact. Excuse me, y'all, I'm reading from my phone here. Provide organizational development and change, leadership to building infrastructure, organizational capabilities, leadership capacity, program solutions, co-creator of Kaiser Permanente's Women in Leadership Program, awesome, with Linkage Incorporated, along with Sister Leadership Development for Women of Color and other underrepresented talent in partnership with Latina Vida. Previous roles at Kaiser Permanente include Diversity and Inclusion Lead, okay, Executive Consultant, Chief Staff, Prior to Casa Permanente, Tara worked on Wall Street, managing global training programs.
Wow.
All right. Taught English as a second language in Taiwan and Venezuela, and led deluxe tour groups, right, to 19 countries across 5 continents as an international travel director. Brain-based certified coach, professional certificates in team coaching, okay, organizational development, and change leadership, leading an okay. Like, you guys are just amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, you know, we bring amazing people.
Right, bringing the heat.
So come on, we're bringing it. All right. So
Yes,
thank you so much for that introduction. And,
course.
you know, that's just a good example of the amazing depth of experience that these leaders bring to the table. And tonight, you guys, we're going to talk about self-promotion. And when we think about self-promotion, it just sounds, you know, it sounds very like bragging, you know. And what I would say is it's really more about how to effectively tell your story in a way that's memorable and also impactful. And the only person who knows how to do that is you. And how do you do that effectively, whether it's in a corporate culture, whether you're in nonprofit or other sectors? And these women bring all of those different backgrounds to the table. And I think we're going to have a terrific conversation tonight. So with that, let me go ahead and have each of our panelists share their heritage and background with the audience. And just how did you end up in the field that you are in today? So let me start with Melva.
All right. Well, let's see. I am an African-American woman. And let's see, my background, I don't know how deep you want me to go, Sue-Ann, but I know you'll cut me off if I go too much. But let's see, African-American woman. I am married. I have 3 kids. They're a very important part of who I am and my journey to today. So you will always hear me lead with them first, because I wouldn't be me without them. Let's see, I am a generational X millennial cusper, and I bring that up because it provides me, I have millennial tendencies, I have Gen X tendencies, and it really depends on where we're at to figure out which side of that I'm straddling at any given time. I was raised by a single mother. I have 1 sibling, a sister who is 10 years older than me, which was a very unique upbringing because, you know, my sister left home when I was 7 years old. So it was almost like I was an only child for a lot of time. And then it was almost like I had 2 moms as well for a period of time. And then, you know, once I went to college, became my own adult, obviously that relationship with my sister and I grew much closer as friends and sisters versus more like the mother-daughter dynamic that we have for a number of years. So that's a little bit about my background. You know, sitting at the intersection of being a Black woman, it's interesting because over the years, I've always talked about I identify as Black first and woman second, which is a very interesting perspective. It took me a while to figure that out when it comes to how I process through my experiences. So you may hear a bit of that as we're through the conversation tonight. I own my own business, as Tara so eloquently described earlier here today in the introductions. I've owned this business for 2 years, actually about close to 2.5 years at this point in time. And here's what I will say. I should have known since I was a kid that I was destined for small business ownership, because through different times of my lives, I can tell you that I was not a person who loved authority. I worked okay in it, but I always liked to be someone who was leading. And that showed up very early. I would say a lot to do with my upbringing. I grew up in the church, the Baptist church. I did a lot of leadership roles within the church. It's where I first learned to speak. You know, I played the cello when I was growing up. They made sure I was always in recital mode with my cello. So I got very comfortable being in front of people and doing those kinds of things. And so that, I would say, is a thread that ran through from my high school life, my college career, the career I had in corporate America. And, you know, a lot of people were not surprised when I took the leap 2.5 years ago. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you, Melva. And I promise you, everyone, that we will go delving in a little deeper about her experience a little later. So although Moana this is her podcast, I don't know how much you really know about her more in depth. So how did you tell us about your background more in depth about how did you get to where you got to?
Okay, so I'm originally from Hawaii. That is a huge part of my identity. I am native Hawaiian, Portuguese, Filipino, Chinese, and Spanish. In Hawaii, we call that the mixed plate. But lots of interactions between different cultures where I come from. But I definitely identify as native Hawaiian. In terms of my background, I grew up in a very family-oriented community, very close relationships there, very strong foundation for where I come from. Like many other, like the ladies here and other people of color, you grow up with some adversity and struggles and challenges along the way. But I am really grateful and I actually embrace a lot of those experiences because they have kind of provided a good foundation for me as I have grown up through my career and helping me to navigate, in the what am I trying to say here? The white-centered cultures that we have to navigate. So let's see, and in terms of my professional background, I am in the information technology space. I have a project management background as well. I work in the federal sector and I currently lead two disparate teams. One is a team that is working in the emerging technology space in the international global markets. And then the second team is a business operations team, which is kind of more of like a chief of staff and PMO role, running support for our executive teams, handling our budgets, performing our comms and marketing presence, and a lot of just picking up all the things that people don't really think about in the daily operations, but is really critical to ensuring that we have good success. And on the side, my husband and I have our own small business, the Burning Spear LLC, where we're kind of like at the intersection of an education and entertainment company. My husband writes our comic book series, The Wildcard Chronicles, and then I write our children's book series, The Adventures of Nakoa and Nohea. All of these we self-publish on our own so that we can maintain our creative control and publish the content that we really think needs to be out in the marketplace that often gets suppressed when pursuing traditional methods out there. And of course, we started the Moana Nui Podcast to uplift BIPOC voices, once again, very much along the same vein, providing platforms for voices and perspectives that need to be heard, but are often pushed to the side.
So basically, you don't sleep, apparently, and you're doing some incredible work, but in very different sectors. So looking forward to exploring that more as well. So with that, Tara, tell us more about your background and how did you get to where you got to?
I know, I'm thinking. So I am really fortunate that I am very aligned with who I am, what I love, what I value, into a role that I think is well suited for me. And I think my theme tonight will be really exuding the power of your authenticity. And by that, I mean, I spent the first 25 years following conventional wisdom, that the idea of embracing diversity and working towards inclusion and achieving equity was not a job or a career, It's squishy, there was no career path. And yet, when I decided that I could not, hide my light of what it is that I truly want to do, the universe, God, everything just fall into place. So I have been in this role of advancing equity, inclusion, and social justice for the last 10 years, plus or minus. And as I grow in my role, what has been the most powerful is that I can draw everything, all of my, traumatic childhood and extreme deprivation, and being a refugee and being new in America and needing to assimilate, wanting to be seen and heard, wanting to, accomplish things. Like, both my joy and sorrow comes into play every single day of my work, because it really is about leading an organization to allow for every individual to bring their whole and authentic self to work, so that they can, contribute with their unique gifts and talents. They can show up with their unique perspectives from their experience. Their life experience is of value. And that I do this work and I live this work, it is nothing short of privilege, but also nothing short of me finding a true calling for myself. And again, it took me 25 years. So I just didn't stumble it. I denied it. I denied my own light for many years. That's why I worked on Wall Street. That's why I wasn't so good with sales and marketing. I did everything else but the work that I truly loved. And I'm fortunate to have been able to do the work that I truly love for the last 10 years. And that is what I was saying about just being in that sweet spot. So that, in essence, is me. And I'm gonna eat some more candy. That's me.
Well, first of all, just the fact that you are in alignment with yourself. For those of you out there, when I talk about being in alignment with yourself, it might sound kind of weird, but in reality, you do have to figure out how you align to yourself, your values, and the things that Tara was talking about, that authenticity, to be who you are, so you can really unleash that power from within, that personal power from within. So I can't wait to delve into that a little bit more. So let me ask each of you, and I'm going to start with Tara this time, about the question around, when in your career have you had to advocate for yourself, like provide an example, and how did you handle it?
Yeah, and it's related to this work. I remember it was 2006, so that's like, 15 years ago. There was the National Diversity Inclusion Conference, and no one knew I secretly loved this, space, because I was managing the federal group account, and my work was nothing to do with diversity inclusion, but this is a little one, but it's the beginning of, I wrote an email to my manager. I explained, what I was requesting and why. And then I just said, the exposure, the learning experience and the exposure will ignite, the flame that's in me. I'm deeply passionate about it. And then, I kind of broke it down to, cost and everything. And it was the beginning of me making a case for what I want. A, you have to know what you want. B, present it, as a business case. You have to channel the mind of a business leader. Why should why should I invest in you? There's travel and expense, there's time off. What is the company going to get out of it? And how will you learn and grow, so I don't have to develop you, because this thing that you're going to is going to give you that. So you kind of have to channel that managers as a business leader and make that case. And you stated, it could be very authentic and personal, but you have to meet some business objectives because that's the mind of a business owner. So any good managers will read that. They're like, she thought it through, she's thinking of, as a business leader, and this is good return on investment. Sure, I'm going to say yes. So that was just like a little one, and I'll stop there. But you get bigger. You learn to ask for bigger things, but you start with like a simple request of like, I want to go to this conference.
So I heard several key nuggets. One, do you know what you want? Number two is that you have to create a business case that's a win for you, win for the customer, win for the company or the organization. And the fact that you can actually articulate what that is. So that's in clear terms. And to be able to do that is key. So with that, let me move over to Melva. Melva, what example do you have where you had to advocate for yourself?
Yeah, this question is, I love this whole topic because I'll be honest with you, during my entire corporate careers, I was thinking back, like, I felt like I always had to advocate for myself. I didn't always know how to advocate for myself best. But for so many reasons, I felt like I was always in that place of where I needed to be ready to explain why I wanted to do what I wanted to do. The example I'll share, though, is, early in my career, 4 years into my career, I decided that I wanted to do something different. I came into the organization as an engineer. I was working that path. The organization had a very, very, I would say, here's the career paths, and maybe there were a couple of zigzags in there, but for the most part, here's the career path that you're supposed to do. However, through the experience I had actually gotten as an engineer and operations leader, I wanted to move into HR. Now, this is 2006. I will tell you, I did not even know to call it HR. I didn't know what it was called. I went and I talked to a friend who was in HR and just was kind of like, I feel like I want to do this work. I've been working on this project where I really had the opportunity to, to lean into building teams and building reward systems and train and do all of that good stuff. And I found a lot of joy in that. And I was looking for some help for what does that mean? Honestly, deep in my soul, I thought, I'm going to be leaving the company and I'm probably going to go do something else. Like, do I need to go work in academia, go work at a college or something of that nature? And through that conversation, he said, well, actually, that's a lot of what we do in HR. So let me tell you more about it. And so it was highly uncommon. I was the second person to ask to move from engineering operations supply chain into HR, the second person in company history. And that person, who happened to still work at the organization, was still around. And they're like, you got to go talk to that person. And then it was, okay, I talked to that person. I actually had spent longer in engineering than that person had. So it was even a little bit different of a situation for me. But, they started to outline, basically, you're going to have to interview with this new function. You have to talk to the engineering leadership and operations leadership because we want to make sure that they recommend you to go into that job. So at, 25 years old, I found myself in this place of really having to advocate more than I ever knew I would have to advocate just to go do something that in my mind was like, just take a new role. And I'm talking interviews up to the director and VP level within the organization when I'm just in my second role with the company. So it was very early career. And, for me, it was about following passion, but I am right there with Tara. It was all about being able to articulate what, I was not very good with it. I'm just going to say this. I was not good at this when I started. The first couple of interviews, thank God I made it to the next. because I stumbled and I fumbled. But as I went along, I learned I had to articulate why in a compelling reason. And it wasn't like, I like people, right? That's not a compelling reason to move into HR. So I had to explain really what I was looking to gain. I had to explain what were going to be the transferable skills for me. So what can I take from where I am right now, and how is that going to benefit, this new organization? And then honestly, they were assessing for, do I have the right demeanor and composure and all those things to actually be able to do this work? And so I just had to be me as well, right? And show up authentically as me. And so I went through that process, and I found an early advocate for me and my plant manager, because I was working in manufacturing at that point in time. And I found an early advocate in my plant manager who said, I've seen your results. I've seen everything that you've done. And I think this will be an excellent opportunity for you. And from that moment, he was basically like my sponsor through the change. But I went in there super buttoned up with him when I went in there. And so that helped with my advocacy. So I would say, finding someone else who can help you advocate for yourself is also important for that process. But that was huge for me.
Absolutely. And so one thing that I want to also highlight is that you've got to understand how decisions are made. So structurally, how politically you're going to have to kind of manage through that process, because part of that is understanding that and who's got the decision-making power. And by the way, Candace Lester said transferable skills, yes. And Shauna said it's relatable. So I think that's fantastic. So with that, Moana, what about you? What are examples? What's an example you have?
So I think for me, I'm going to bring this one a little bit more on a personal level. And it's still work related, but in a different realm. So about 5 years ago, I kind of out of the blue, I discovered that my father had been diagnosed with cancer. And so being the eldest in my family, I've always been the one to kind of take care of people. And being away from him, right? Like I'm on the East Coast and he and my mother are in Hawaii, and she's also, they're both aging, right? And so I felt like I needed to go and be there for him, like it was diagnosed stage 4, so it was already bad. But part of this, like in order to be away from your job for a while, like not everybody has great benefits that enable this. Fortunately, I work within the government space, and my particular organization has great benefits that provide for kind of like, more extended time away from the office. And the way in which I had to advocate for myself is I was already working in type of a liaison role, which is a singleton role operating on behalf of my organization to another agency. And so if I'm not there, the work is also not getting done, right? So to ask for, 90 days away from my job, it is kind of a big lift. But so what I had to do, kind of what Melva mentioned in terms of the HR aspects and understand who's making the decisions, like I really did a lot of research into what the policies allowed, making sure I was fully informed on those things so that when I went to my leadership to ask for it, I already knew I was informed myself. Because if you don't know, then it's easy for them to say no, and you don't understand the options that are available to you. And so, I had told them like, this is what's going on. I know it's really last minute. I will, check in as much as, you all need me to, but this is important to me. And, if we have to make some changes, we can talk about that and deal with that. But like right now, my priority is my family. It was a really difficult decision for me, not just from a professional, day job kind of perspective, but also as a business owner, because I had to put that to the side too. But for me, I don't regret the decision. I had to advocate for myself, I think, remind myself along the way, because I really felt guilty about not being able to balance all of the things that I am passionate about and feel that's important to me. But a big part of that too, I was also spending a lot of time away from my husband. So it was just a really difficult situation from a lot of different areas. But fortunately, you know, I had people in my circle who were supporting me, you know, like let me know if you need anything. I know you're going to be away for a while. So if you need some help, you know, let me know, kind of thing. But yeah, that was a difficult situation. We made it through, and there was a little bit bumps along the way where HR was kind of telling me, well, you might have to go look for a new job soon. And so it was just really tough. But I think the main point to drive home is to make sure that you're informed of your options and you are communicating with, you know, your leadership and the people who are depending on you to perform whatever your job might be, and asking for help and resources to help you along the way.
Absolutely. And Moana, you said something that was, I think, important, which is like you are advocating yourself first to yourself, to make sure to say, okay, like this is something I've got to do or I have to do. I need to do it. And so I think that's important because sometimes we have to work up to it before we can sell that, right? So I think that's huge. And so, okay, so Shauna said that's a big thing that I think stops a lot of Black and Brown folks from advocating for ourselves or navigating stereotypes. And by the way, I'm just going to say it's, you know, not just Black and Brown, but also Asian people. So,
Yep.
you know, so let's include, that's all inclusive in my mind.
Absolutely.
So absolutely. All right. So let's talk a little bit about feedback for a second, because part of the whole self-promotion and all that requires you to be self-aware. And sometimes that requires listening to others for feedback. So what's some of the kind of meaningful feedback that you received from someone else? And let me start with Moana on this one, then Tara, then Melva.
Oh, I'm so excited about this question when I saw it, because I get to shine some light on you. So some feedback that I got, I can't remember if it was last month's episode or the month before, but after that discussion, you know, Sue Ann and I hung out for a little bit afterwards, and I told her about a difficult situation that I was navigating on one of my teams. I had someone who is a poor performer, and I was trying to, you know, help to improve her performance and highlight kind of the ways where she was falling short. And this person was, the hard part is that it wasn't an ability issue. It was really just like, in her mind, the things that we expected her to do of the job was not important to her. And helping her to connect some dots in that area was a bit difficult. And at that time, I was like really emotionally frustrated about this whole thing. And so I asked Sue Ann, I was like, hey, you know, I'm going through this. And she gave me some feedback. She's like, you know, Moana, sometimes you got to be creative about the way that you talk to these people, you know, like sit her down, you know, go have a coffee, something that's a little bit more informal environment. You know, she was like, you know, how often are you having to meet with this person? I'm like, well, I mean, it's on like a bi-weekly basis. This is how bad it is now, you know, like it's really holding hands. And she said, Sue Ann said, well, you know, sometimes you just gotta think differently. Like, you know, talk to her like, well, do you really want me to micromanage you to this level? I mean, we're already meeting 2 times a week. Do we really need to meet every day? And I was just like, I hadn't even thought about that. You know, I was so focused on like my way of trying to approach developing someone, allowing Sue Ann, who's like, I really valued her opinion too, because she was removed. Like, she wasn't even my chain of command. She wasn't my team. She had no stakes in like the end results of this. So I think that's really important too, as you're navigating difficult situations, whether it's for yourself or you know, something that you're dealing with in your life, is to allow trusted voices into your perspective and help you to see a different angle that you might not be considering.
Yeah. And again, you know, it's perspectives, getting some different angle, you know, to your point, you know, there's no stake. So you could be a little bit more free thought, right? About what are some options. So yeah. And you're trying to support the person.
Yes.
Ultimately. Right. So, All right, very good. What about Tara? Oh, you're on mute.
Just got my, okay. I like Moana's story. I'm going to build on something similar. And that is, I think it's feedback from my executive about my strong sense of ownership, where there's a healthy boundary of taking personal accountability, taking responsibility, and then taking ownership. And like there's a healthy boundary with all those three. And that is depending on the role that you play. So, for example, if you are a manager of an employee and you provide guidance and direction, clear deliverables, milestones are agreed upon, and you offer supervision, you did all of that part, good management 101, and the result is subpar, not meet expectation, and you feel bad that you have to like give them constructive feedback and or like even manage, putting them on like a performance improvement plan, like you did your part. All you can do is hold yourself accountable and responsible, and you take ownership of what it is that you were supposed to do. And if you did all that, done. Like you don't own it. And I think for me, so that's the role of a manager. But as it relates to leading change, and where you're an advocate, you're a consultant, you're an advisor, you're inspiring change leader, all of that, I've had a really hard time not seeing change, as much as I like to see change. There's good change, there's incremental change, there's percolating change, but it wasn't like change, you know what I mean? Not the big stuff, it's a bunch of little stuff. And I was like frustrated with and dissatisfied with that level of change, to which my executive was reminding me that I don't own it. I can affect cultural and systemic change. I could affect it. I could help make it happen. But what happens and how much it happens, that is up to the people who's invested for it to happen. So if you're an organizational leader, you're a senior leader, you're the CEO, they are more invested for it to happen than you are, right? Where I was taking this full ownership, oh my God, and it was not healthy. So lessons learned, take appropriate, healthy ownership, responsibility, and accountability, and that's it. And then you go home, you let it go to sleep, and there's nothing else that you could have done. And so I think that has been helpful. Because, for us, for people who are really passionate, who want to make things better and want things to change, and you don't see very much of it, you kind of bang your head against the wall, what else could I have done? Maybe it wasn't as this or that. No, you did your part. Other people need to step up and do their part, right?
Well, and Tara, you bring up a point of what is really in your control. I mean, right? Do you really control other people's, what they do or don't do? No. But you can be a catalyst, you can support, you can, coach, advise, but it is ultimately up to that individual to take that action. So our own attitudes and our own actions, that's all we control, right? Yeah. To your point.
Yeah.
So,
it really, I channel the serenity prayer every hour of the day.
Yes.
And I'm not recovering anything, but I channel the serenity prayer, and I think that letting go of that sense of control is really key to being able to do this work.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And by the way, you'll have better health, mental health for that too. Sometimes you just got to know when to let it go.
Yeah.
Right. So Melva, what about you?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach here on this particular question around feedback. So if you look me up, if you check me out on LinkedIn, Facebook, if you follow my company page, feedback is something I talk about a lot. I'm on a pulpit somewhere talking about this all the time. So because I believe it's so important in every aspect of life, right? It's so important to help us. I really believe feedback is a gift. Even if you disagree with it, there's always a nugget. If you just like take a step back and you look at it, there is something within that you needed to know, and will help you get better. I'm going to particularly think back to two different points in my career where feedback, and it was really the same type of feedback, was super important to me. And, I mentioned that, I grew up as a single mom. I come from a blue collar family. Nobody had really spent any time in corporate America. So navigating that was new for me, right? And I mentioned I moved into HR from engineering. I didn't come in with the normal networks that were established. I was recruited at a diversity conference, National Society of Black Engineers, into the company. So I didn't have those like campus team connections and all of that within the company. So I just found, right, I was like an odd duck a lot. And I felt that way, at least, through a lot of my career. But there were 2 points where I had managers that I wanted to be at a certain place in my career, and I could not figure out, what it was going to take. And I'd look at my peer set and I'm like, I'm not like, you look and you size yourself up against those people, right? And figure out where you think you are and where you're performing. But I had 2 managers that made all the difference in helping me to really understand what performance looked like to be and where I wanted to go. And by really explaining that expectation of, okay, so here's what you're delivering right now. This is at this level, right? This is at that level. To get this to the level that we want to, here's exactly what you need to do, right? Like, here's exactly the types of things we need to see. Here's the conversations that we're having when we're making these promotional decisions about people. And that was really, really helpful. It wasn't, conjecture, oh, if this were to happen, or, just have more presence or do more above and beyond, all those things, which really don't get you anywhere because they're not specific. They don't tell you anything about where you are, especially if you personally have a different perception of how you're performing than how the organization is looking at you. And I really, really appreciated those 2 managers who, frankly, that was not the company way. That was not the company way. I mean, in HR, I was told, like, you don't tell people that kind of stuff, but they took the time to really help me see what those differences were. And frankly, at those points, I had decisions to make, right? Because there were things at one of the earliest, I'm like, yeah, I can crush that, right? And I did, and I continued to move up. At another point, I was like, yeah, but that's not brand Melva. And so this is where we're either going to have to figure out if there's some alignment we can have, or I'm going to have to exit and go do something different. But that was my choice, because now I understood what it meant, what it was going to look like. And I knew there were things that I was willing to do, and there were things that I was not willing to do. And that was important for me.
So Melva, you bring up a good point about making conscious decisions. So one of the experiences that I had working for a Fortune 50 company is you move up to a certain level, and then there's a requirement that you have to move. And if you can't be mobile, then you are not going to move up. And I think a lot of people make those choices, and I made that choice, and I chose to move, but not everybody could do that. But that is a conscious choice, but it was a requirement. So I think you have to understand what are those requirements, and are you willing to do it, right?
Right.
And make that conscious decision. So that's a great point. So I want to shift over to you. You guys have been talking a little bit about your personal brands. And I want to ask you, how did you develop your personal brand? And then as it relates to feedback, what did you actually incorporate that was helpful? So that I'm curious, because sometimes, you have to be, I always say you have to filter the feedback. Sometimes you'll take it, sometimes you need to maybe modify it, and sometimes you might need it to put it aside. depending on the quality of the feedback. Okay. So my question to you is, what have you actually incorporated that strengthened that personal brand of yours that you have? And what is your personal brand? So let me start with Tara on this one.
I have to go on mute. Yeah, so let me talk about, it's like the personal brand. I definitely am known to be a driver, passionate, but driving and executing, and making things happen, because I'm a change leader. It kind of goes with the territory. And you do that through, coalescing a diverse stakeholder community and getting people to do a lot of different things to kind of make progress. But I think that the feedback that I've incorporated is something around this African proverb that, we like, I say this a lot. And that is if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And my leadership growth has been that I'm a superstar performer. I can get all this stuff done. And then you look back and you're like the people way back, because you just, you didn't lead. You kind of just were the roadrunner. And leading for the work that I do needs to be slow and steady. And every step of the way you involve everybody, even if it slows you down, even if you even go backward because, like maybe you went too fast. And that's really humbling. But I've adopted that mindset of going together so that we can go far. And I think that if I were to be really honest with myself, that, there was a part of me that was my ego. I'm just so good. And I can show you all the things that I'm good at and all the things I can get done. And if you don't get it done, I'll just get it done for you. And that was killing me. And so leading had to be less ego. And I have a lot less, but I still have some. I'm human. And choosing to also being heart-centered and also adopting servant leadership has strengthened my leadership capability, but also I've seen tremendous impact. And so I would say the last 5 or 6 years, I talk about leading with love, being heart-centered. I talk about being in service, which is servant leadership. And I talk about journey. And I talk about recognizing and respecting, where you're at in the journey, because it's a continuum. And the work that we do, there's no there. It's just a little bit of progress. And progress means different things to different people. You know what I mean? And so it took that, like Wall Street, superpower, high competency, all that. I had to put that aside and just be truly a kind person and be accepting and being gracious and being respectful of the people that they come from different, walks of life, and they look at this work differently, and that's the journey, and it's the journey that I share with others, because that is the journey of the leadership in this space. So I think that now I'm known for, yes, highly competent, highly capable, but I'm known to being a coach, and someone that they can speak to, and when they're down, they're struggling, and that I care enough to listen and make time for them, and that I see them as a whole person, not just whatever executive or leader that I'm, catering to. Like, they can call on me to support them as a person. And I really feel good about that growth in myself. It's taken me years to get to this point. I'm a work in progress, but that's where I'm at.
All right. Well, I think that one of the things that so powerful about that is at the end of the day, if you can slow down on the front end and get people involved with the vision and what you're trying to do, on the back end, you can execute faster. So that's one of the biggest things, is that if you take a little more time on the front end, execute faster on the back end, in conjunction, in collaboration. And and you get to celebrate success together. That's amazing. That's very rewarding, right? So thank you for sharing that, Tara. What about you, Moana?
So I think some traits that are similar to Tara. Definitely known for being a high achiever, dedicated, super passionate about the things that I care about. But definitely people oriented. That's always been something that's come natural to me, and trying to find ways where the team can be in harmony. Sometimes that can be a little bit a negative too, because there are obviously this is what I learned in the last couple of months. When there isn't harmony and trying to navigate those more conflict type of situations. And of course, due to being a person of color in our spaces, you definitely have to be resourceful and always creative with your approaches. But sometimes, being a high achiever, you can, at least for me, I often battle with the impatience thing, right? Like, because I have high expectations for other people too. And of course, not everybody can meet those. And so some of the feedback that I've gotten from, my mentors and my supervisors is to keep that in mind when I do get frustrated. Not to let the team see that so much, because it's not just me that I'm impacting. It's also, the vibe in the room, and as they are trying to execute their work as well. It's just this influence thing that you're always being watched when you're in a leadership position, right? So you have to be mindful of the way you kind of portray yourself. And so that is one of those that, like, I've heard a couple of times. And I think the second time, like, I definitely absorbed it much better. And I was able to, I've been applying it. I've been very intentional about that feedback, because I know that is one of my areas for growth. And that obviously requires a lot of self-awareness for yourself too, and honesty with understanding, where you might not be that strong. But being more intentional about that, I have noticed the difference with specific team members that I have not been my best self with. But I have definitely noticed the increased productivity on their end, a change in their attitude, and just better, overall working relationships in certain segments of my team. So I think that my biggest takeaway is that sometimes it's not really all about you. It's also helping to make sure that the team under you has what they need to be successful. And when they're successful, it's ultimately going to reflect on you and your ability to keep them moving in a good direction.
Well said. Yeah, I think that when I don't know, for some reason, I say it is not always about logic. Yes. Just because you think that's what's logical does not mean that everybody else thinks and that's what it is. Yep. So I think knowing that people are motivated by different things, that it is important to understand what are they motivated by, right? Sure. So for you to be vulnerable with them and being authentic, I think that's very powerful. So Melva.
I love this question about brand. Who am I and what brand do I have? I don't think I know that people will tell me, I'm a person of high integrity. I'm a person who takes care with people. I'm often, doesn't matter how the relationship starts, somehow I'm in some type of coach mentor mode pretty easily with people pretty early in a relationship. I do build relationships well. I'm insightful. I'm down to earth. and I'm a great listener. And then the last word that's important to me is bold. And so for me, people will describe that boldness in a lot of different ways, depending on how they know me or how it's showing up. But it was something that I was really intentional about. I heard a leader, a senior leader at one of my previous organizations talk about his personal vision for his life. And it was at a work event, yet he talked about this personal vision that he had for his life. And I really, like, it stuck with me actually for years. I can recall a lot of what he talked about today, because it just felt like everything was in alignment for him. Where he was in his career, he talked about his family, his faith, how all these things kind of were important to him. And at the same time, you could see that he was prioritizing his time that way. You could see he was prioritizing like basically everything, and it just seemed to be in alignment. And so I went through this process of saying, I want to be in that type of alignment, in purpose, knowing exactly what I stand for, and really not leaving it to however I'm showing up in that moment, but really to be intentional about the experience that people have with me. And bold was something that I put on there because I had this desire, I live bold, love bold, right? Be bold, right? And bold being risk-taking, using your heart, being courageous, because I found myself in my career often having a different opinion or being the person that was saying the things that nobody else would speak up and say. But everybody knew it, or maybe nobody knew it, but they needed to know it. And so it was something that I got super intentional about, kind of living out day in, day out, so I could be in alignment with that. So that's my small little podium, I'll call it, on brand.
I'm going to call that the through line. You've got a through line of.
That's right.
Yes, absolutely. That's like, oh my gosh. It's like, think about how you could live your life if you had the through line, right? And the fact that it takes work to get there.
It does.
It's a self journey, and it never stops, in my opinion, because things shift, right? So with that, you guys, can you believe an hour has gone by already? There's no way. All right, so I'm going to ask each of our panelists to take 30 seconds and give like a piece of advice. If I'm focusing on self-promotion, how do I do it? What advice can you give me? Let's go. Moana, you first.
I think I would say that when you're advocating for yourself, focus on your strengths and the things that make you unique. There are spaces where you can kind of talk yourself into like, well, so many other people have addressed said topic, whatever it is. But you can still have a voice in that space because your unique self has a set of experiences that no one else has, and all of that has value. I mean, these panels, for example, we're all panelists, we're all professionals, we're all doing these things, but each of us has a unique perspective, and you can learn from every single person that you meet.
I love it. Tara.
Building on Moana's, it really is about being genuine, which is about being authentic. And the reason that is so important is because that is what people trust. And if they feel like they, they like know you for real because you're allowing them to see your real self, even if you're not quite, polished or perfect. They would rather see you, flawed and feel trusting of who you are because you're real, than, you trying to be all that, because they can see you through it. So being true, be the best version of yourself, but be who you are, which is the authenticity. And there is so much power. Own it and shine it and let others see you.
I love it.
Love it.
Melva.
All right, I'll sum it up with kind of 3 short phrases. Okay. Let go of fear, speak your truth, and if not you, who?
Ooh, yes. It's so powerful.
Woo! And I'm going to say, speak your truth and double down and make sure that you bring your inner power. And I'm telling you, that light is going to shine bright and people are going to see that. So
Yes.
that's what I would say. Speak your truth. Be in your truth. So with that, Moana, we had another incredible session with these amazing, amazing leaders, including yourself. So thank you again for hosting us. I really appreciate our time together for these Development Thursdays.
Yes, I really do too. It's the highlight of my week for sure. So thank you, all of you, for coming on the show, offering your perspective, and really being your own genuine selves. I really love hearing from these wonderful leading ladies in all aspects of the professional workspace. So we'll go around real quick. Tell folks where they can find you, support your business, engage with you, get leadership mentoring and consulting from each of you. We'll start with Tara.
I work for Kaiser Permanente, so that's where you can find me. I'm in Northern California in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Can you talk? Are you on LinkedIn?
I am, but
okay.
I don't have any social media presence. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right. For me, all right, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Melville Holt. You can find us at paceleadership.com. PAISE. Sounds like setting the pace, spelled like Paisley without something at the end. But paceleadership.com, also on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Melva. And of course, Sue-Ann.
CAPAW.org, CAPAW.org, and you can find me on LinkedIn, Sue-Ann Hong. You can find CAPAW. I'm here if you want to get a hold of me. And by the way, one plug, I have Unleash the Shiro in You program, Women of Color, 5 years or less in the professional workforce. I am recruiting. I need to find you. All of you who are out there who need leadership development. And by the way, I do not charge for this program. It is all by sponsorship. So come see me.
Yes.
Go see her. It's a great program.
I wish I was 5 years in because I would be in. But that's a great opportunity for our young up and coming leaders. I definitely need to remember to share that with my mailing list. But yes, once again, thank you all so much for tuning in, our panelists and those who are watching us live or listening to us on the replay. Thank you all for supporting CAPAW and the Moana Nui Podcast. You can find us weekly every Thursday on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook Live, and then also on all podcast platforms for the audio streaming service. So with that said, I am going to sign off on behalf of the panel. I hope everyone has a wonderful week, a wonderful Juneteenth weekend, and take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can't keep history on the shelf, if they won't tell it, we will. If this the land of the free was a freedom then, when they annexed Hawaii and called it Cedar Lands, without any type of payment and no signing off, called themselves the Republic in 1894. 1.2 million acres overtaken from the native Hawaiians. When they resisted, the West retaliated in violence and erasure. The Hawaiian language is banned as part of colonialism's plan to expand, Stuck between a rock and a hard place, multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation, colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals, school will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf, if we won't tell it we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf, if we won't tell it we will. We will. So if we put Hawaii into perspective, well, Black and Asian history is interconnected. Considering the fight with the Pacific, then of course versus Asia, they was treated as a middleman for war, but didn't let the Western colorism run its course. Cause dark skin was a sign of dignity to core. The land was taken in the name of capitalism, when prior to it was an actual kingdom. Clap back at the system. Stuck between a rock and a hard place, multiple bombings of Kaho'olawe. As a part of their ongoing war with Asia, used it as a place for target practice. No consent or compensation, colonizers call for annexation. No work out for all the locals, school will never let you know. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf, if we won't tell it we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf, if we won't tell it we will. So many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf, if we won't tell it we will. Too many stories left to tell, even if we have to ourselves. Can keep history on the shelf, if we won't tell it we will. We will.